The bright lights of the showroom gleamed against polished cars, but one man was told he didn't belong there. A black customer walked in, his eyes filled with quiet excitement, yet within minutes he was humiliated, shoved toward the door, treated as if he were less than human. To the manager, he was just another man to dismiss, another face to push aside. But what no one in that dealership knew was that the man they kicked out wasn't just a customer. He was the one person who had the power to change all of their lives. And when the truth came out, the entire room fell silent. Subscribe and join. Our community Marcus had worked his whole life to overcome the odds stacked against him. Growing up in a small town, he was the boy who walked past luxury cars on the street and whispered to himself, "One day, I'll own something like that." But life wasn't easy. He faced constant reminders that society didn't see him as equal. Teachers who doubted him, employers who overlooked him, strangers who assumed the worst. Still, Marcus never allowed bitterness to define him. Instead, he studied harder, worked longer, and carried himself with a quiet determination. Years of persistence paid off. He became a successful entrepreneur, investing smartly, building businesses, and finally stepping into the life he had once only dreamed of. To most, he was just another face, but behind the scenes, Marcus had just purchased a chain of luxury car dealerships. One of them, located downtown, was his pride, a symbol of how far he had come. And on an ordinary afternoon, Marcus decided to visit it quietly, without fanfare, wearing simple clothes that didn't hint at wealth or power. He wanted to see how his employees treated customers when they didn't know the owner was watching. But what awaited him that day would reveal more than just customer service. It would expose the deep prejudice still festering beneath polished floors and shiny vehicles. Marcus stepped through the glass doors with calm confidence, but within minutes, everything he had built and believed in was about to be tested, because the people inside had already judged him before he said a single word. The dealership floor shimmered with spotless chrome and glass, a place designed to impress. Marcus walked in quietly, his eyes drawn to a sleek black sedan parked in the center. But before he could take more than a few steps, a salesman's smirk cut through the polished atmosphere. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his tone clipped. Not with respect, but with suspicion. Marcus nodded politely, explaining he wanted to learn more about the car. Instead of welcoming him, the salesman glanced at Marcus's worn jacket, then exchanged a knowing look with a colleague. Their whispers carried across the floor. "Waste of time," one muttered. Minutes later, the dealership manager emerged. He didn't greet Marcus with a handshake or a smile. Instead, his eyes narrowed, sizing him up as if he were an intruder. "Sir, these vehicles aren't cheap," he said flatly. "Maybe you should check somewhere more affordable." His words were sharp, cutting, but wrapped in a false smile that only made the insult sting deeper. Marcus stayed calm. He asked again about the car, but the manager's patience snapped. In full view of other customers, he waved his hand toward the exit. "Look, we don't have time to waste. Please leave." The air in the showroom shifted. Some customers turned away uncomfortably. Others watched in silence, the tension too heavy to ignore. Marcus felt the familiar weight of humiliation pressing down, the same weight he had carried his whole life in a world too quick to judge his skin, too blind to see his worth. But this time, something was different. He wasn't the powerless boy who once dreamed outside the showroom window. He was the man who owned the keys to this very place. Still, he didn't reveal it. Not yet. Instead, Marcus walked slowly toward the door, his silence more powerful than anger. Every step carried a decision. Should he expose the truth now, or wait until the right moment when his words would cut deeper than any insult? The room buzzed. With whispers, the manager already turning his back, certain he had put Marcus in his place. But what none of them realized was that they had just humiliated the very man who had the power to change their futures. The real shock was still to come. Marcus paused at the glass doors, his hand resting on the handle. For a brief second, he considered walking away, letting the sting of humiliation fade as he had so many times before. But then he turned, his eyes steady, his posture unshaken. The room quieted. Something about the way he stood commanded attention. The desk manager, still smug, crossed his arms. "Sir, I told you, this isn't the place for you." His voice dripped with arrogance, unaware of the storm about to break. Marcus stepped back into the showroom, his calm voice carrying across the polished floor. "You're right," he said slowly. "This isn't the place for me." He let the silence hang heavy, every eye fixed on him. "It's the place I own." The words struck like thunder. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The salesmen's faces drained of color. The manager's smirk faltered, replaced by disbelief. What did you just say?" he stammered. Marcus pulled a folder from under his arm and laid it on the nearest desk. Inside were the official papers, his name, his signature, the seal of ownership. Gasps filled the room. The same man they had dismissed, insulted, and shoved toward the door was their new boss. The manager's voice cracked as he tried to recover. "Sir, I didn't realize—" But Marcus cut him off with a quiet strength. "That's the problem. You didn't want to realize. You didn't even try." His words pierced deeper than anger, leaving the manager trembling under the weight of his own prejudice. In that moment, the showroom flipped upside down. The powerful were exposed as small, and the man they tried to belittle stood taller than ever. The silence that followed wasn't just shock. It was the uncomfortable truth of what racism looks like when it's caught in the light. The manager's face burned with shame as the reality settled in. The very man he had mocked and forced out was not just a customer. He was the owner, the one who would now decide his future. The silence in the room was suffocating. Every employee and customer could feel it, a moment where truth outweighed pride. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Calmly, he addressed the room. "How you treat people when you think. They're powerless says more about you than anything else. Today, you've shown me who you really are." His words weren't just for the manager. They were for everyone who had watched in silence, too afraid or too comfortable to speak up. The manager stammered an apology, but Marcus shook his head. "Respect isn't something you offer only to those you think deserve it. It's something you give to everyone." With that, he made a decision that would ripple through the entire dealership. He let the manager go on the spot. Not out of anger, but as a statement that prejudice had no place in his company. For the employees, it was a wake-up call. For the customers, it was a story they would carry long after they left that day. And for Marcus, it was more than justice. It was a reminder that the fight against racism isn't always won with anger, but with truth, courage, and action. When he finally walked out of the dealership, the same glass doors that once felt like barriers now swung open in triumph. Marcus had turned humiliation into empowerment, not just for himself, but for anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. And here's the question that lingers long after his story ends. How many times do we dismiss someone not knowing the greatness they carry inside them? If this story touched you, don't just watch. Be part of the change. Hit subscribe and join our community of voices that matter.